Paul, it's great to be here with you and to be at the summit today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Maybe we could just start. I'm sure everyone in the audience knows what Fizna is, but for the one person that doesn't, tell us, what problem does Fizna solve?
Fizna is best thought of as a bridge between the physical and the digital. It's short for physical DNA. And we represent physical objects in 3D models in a code, which is actually a unique technical primitive that we created that allows us to show how all things are related. So customers use this to find models that they already have to speed up their design, the product design, to identify alternative parts to cut down on procurement costs, identify a part in front of them, and then Fizna can not only tell them what part that is specifically, but also visualize where that goes, how it can be used, and if something else could be used in its stead. So supply chain engineering, warehouse management, procurement, maintenance, and quality control are the most common areas that we see adoption today. And that's just enterprise. We also have a product that people might be more aware of, which is called fangs.com, which acts as a 3D Google for consumers, which is totally free. And our company is very focused on creating APIs that allow our core technology at Fizna to be used by other developers and also other startups to create completely new types of software.
What are some of the just most basic use cases for using the product?
So the most basic use cases would be if you're an engineer that's designing products, they don't have the ability to search as effectively as you would if you're searching text, right? So they very often have a hard time finding something that's already been designed, and as a result, they'll redesign it, and then somebody else will redesign that, and they label these things with part numbers, which doesn't help. So they are wasting a lot of their time either searching for parts or redesigning them. And that then creates another problem, right? You have a standard issue, and when your company orders those designs inside of parts, they're often using too many. They're buying the same thing from various vendors because they think that they're different components, and really they're all the same. So there's a huge loss of procurement spending that we help to avoid. And the main problem that people have is really just software traditionally can't understand the physical. And so the ability to identify that in the in-person setting really connects the whole digital thread. So if I find something out in the field and realize that it tends to break down, I can put that input into the software. And then the engineer, next time they're creating a new product, they'll see, hey, this design feature that I'm adding or I'm thinking to add is predicted by Fizna's AI or its machine learning to potentially cause either a cost issue, a manufacturability issue, or a maintenance issue later on. And this might be a more optimal way to design. So it helps throughout the entire life cycle of a product in a way that wasn't possible in the past.
So when you founded Fizna in 2015, how is this, where you are today? Is that where you were then? Were you just kind of, slowly getting people to that vision, or has it evolved over time?
It's evolved. What we've realized since we founded the company was, we knew the problem was what the computing problem was, the technology problem was, the use cases that we foresaw. The one that I had in mind, what inspired me to found the company in the first place was the difficulty that I had. I actually have a law degree. Never wanted to be a lawyer, but I wanted to get a degree. Got it in Germany. It's a long story, but I was in patent law, and we couldn't search. We could search anything that was flat, a two-dimensional image, but searching for a 3D model with a 3D model wasn't possible. And everything that we tried that was on the market was not actually doing that. It was searching images with images that happened to be of 3D models. So we needed a new technical primitive that would break down the actual geometry of something into something that code can understand or software can actually work with. And what we've found since we started the company was that it's not just patent search there, and it's not just the use cases I listed either. There are hundreds of use cases, not that we've thought up, that we've been approached about. And the reason that we're creating these APIs is that we can't create 300, 400 different companies and products, right? But we can create a platform that allows other people to use this so that software can actually enhance our physical lives and not just be this digital auxiliary to the world that we actually live in.
One thing that strikes me about what you're doing is sort of how the use cases have evolved and how there's so many more. I mean, you just said it really thoughtfully and probably more humbly than you needed to, of saying that that people have brought these things to you, things you never dreamed of. As you think back to early 2015 or 16 when you're pitching, venture capitalists or investors, and this question about, well, what's your total addressable market, or how big can this be? And now you're 6 years later, and you can kind of see so much more now than you could see then. I wonder, how as you look back on how you talked about it then versus how you talk about it now, how has that changed over time?
Well, we've learned more over time, and it is true that people have come to us with the use cases. I wish I could take credit for thinking of all of that, but that wouldn't be accurate. We've all these companies come to us with problems, and they ask us, "Can you solve this?" What we do think of is how we can use our technology to solve that. But the idea but knowing that problem is out there isn't something that we necessarily inherently knew. We found out from the market. So what we've learned from the time that I pitched it to now is that the addressable market is not only different, it's much larger. That being said, we've also matured in our understanding of how to pursue it. Depending on when you go back, if I were to show you different pitch decks for Fizna, you might think I was pitching different companies, because at one point we thought this should be a quality control tool. At one point we thought it should be used for plagiarism prevention even. We went through different iterations of what we should actually focus on, because we kept finding these new use cases and thinking, oh, that's the low-hanging fruit, we should tackle that. It took us a while to realize that the area we're focused on now, which is the creation and production and life of a product, that area, and trying to make people not only more efficient but more effective in that process, that's really where we need to focus. And that sounds like a pretty broad area, and it is, but the software is designed in such a way that it isn't a huge product range that we have to create for that. It's one thing, but we also realized that to pursue the other use cases, things in healthcare, for instance, things in inspection automation and robotics, and a lot of the AI areas and AR and VR, and IoT, for all those areas, we've realized we can't be everything to everyone, but what we can do is we can build this in such a way that it's a platform where these APIs can be reused by others, so that others can go create software that solves a previously impossible problem with a previously unavailable type of code. And that's our strategy now.
I'd love to, you have incredible investors, Tiger, GV, Sequoia, and others. I'd love to, with the audience that we have and the startups that we have, I'd love to just dig in and just get sort of tactical on your relationship with Sequoia, if possible. You could just tell us, how did you originally meet them? How did that relationship start? When did it start? To when you actually got funded. Could you just walk through some of the sort of logistics of that, so we could understand, how you did that?
Sure. So it was pretty straightforward. There wasn't anything complicated to it. Our first investor was Drive Capital out of Columbus, and Mark Kwame is the partner at Drive, who made the investment and also sits on our board. And when we were going from our Series A to our Series B, we were pitching to a number of different VCs, and we had different offers and different options we could go with, but we decided to go with Sequoia because they have a really strong reputation. And the introduction just came via email, and from Mark to one of the partners there, and we had a series of conversations. And Sean McGuire and Doug Leone are the two partners involved from Sequoia with Fizna. And Sean in particular, he has a pretty good understanding of this general area of mathematics where Fizna actually plays in, and how we create this core code that we do. So he really had a lot of appreciation for how big of a deal the software was. And when we shared the market data, it made complete sense to them. They were like, yeah, this is actually a very, very big deal. And it was a pretty quick process, from the pitch to the term sheet onward. It wasn't there's not really any special technique or strategy that I can think of that matters, except for, it's important to have a product that's real. It's important to have customers that are real, and it's important to be real. If you believe in what you're doing and you believe in yourself, others will believe in you too. I think that success is, the vast majority of it is mindset. Only a small percentage of it is tactics.
One thing you said that was really interesting is the fact that you had multiple offers. And I have an investor who always tells me, when we get, we've raised a few rounds of funding as well. And he always says, like, when we get the first term sheet, he's like, okay, well, good start, keep going. You need to get more. And, I wonder, for you, getting a firm like Sequoia to be involved and to get them to make a decision quickly. I wonder what impact you think having those other offers actually had on the ability to move so quickly with them, because it would seem like, like putting that kind of pressure, or at least like the pressure on a deal that, like, hey, a decision needs to get made, a deal needs to get done. Like, the best way to do that is to go and get multiple people interested in it. And the best way to leverage and getting the best deal for your company with the best partners is to get multiple deals. What's been your experience in terms of raising funding and doing that? Has that always been the case, or sometimes, or how have you found that in terms of you sort of negotiating the best deal you can?
You're certainly right. If you have multiple offers from multiple firms, it makes it easier to negotiate, and you do have leverage. I mean, that's true for every area of business. The one thing I'll say though is that I wouldn't think about it just like, hey, if I am able to get a couple of offers, then I'm able to get then maybe I'll get a Sequoia. Sequoia wouldn't make an offer if somebody else, if another firm made an offer and Sequoia thought it was a totally bad product, they wouldn't invest anyway. The reason that you want multiple offers, outside of leverage, I think the more important reason is that you want to be able to choose who you're working with. When you take on a VC, especially if they're taking on a board seat, that's a very, very intense relationship. It's going to be a long relationship, and hopefully intense in a very positive way. And you need to find somebody who truly understands what your company is, what your product does, and someone that you can stand to work with. If there's someone that you absolutely can't stand to be around, your life is going to be miserable. So it's important. People often think of this as a one-way thing. I'm going to take whatever money I can get from whatever VC I can get it from. But the truth is that if your company has something that's investable, something that's worth investing in, you'll get multiple offers as long as you're persistent enough. And you should, because it's very much a two-way street. You need to decide on the VC you're going to take money from, not just the other way around.
Yeah, and in some ways, those offers and that funding, it sort of validates that you're on the right track as well. Not always, but a lot of times it does. We saw MailChimp announced yesterday that it was acquired for $12 billion. It was completely bootstrapped. We're now in this sort of era of mega funding rounds. What is your, perspective on the, like, knowing how much to raise and when to raise versus like when to just put your head down and get to work and deliver for the customer? Like, how do you sort of weigh, as people out there figuring out, like, should I be out, like, spending all my time fundraising, and like, trying to make traction there? Should I be, like, trying to get traction with customers and build revenue? Or, like, how do you balance those two things?
It very much depends on the kind of business you're building. Fizna is the 7th company that I've started, and the others were much less capital intensive. So I didn't need to raise as much money for them, but they also weren't as complicated of a product. Fizna is an extremely involved product. It took us years just to make the core algorithms work correctly and create that core code that I mentioned, let alone finding product market fit and getting widespread adoption. Those things take time for a product that's, essentially a technical primitive, and you're building on top of that. That's very capital intensive. So if I did bootstrap as much as I could at the very beginning, because I didn't want to take on funding for something that was going to fail, and I didn't know if it would fail or not. Once we realized that it worked, then we started going after funding as needed. We only recently started doing these larger rounds because, well, one, we had evidence that there was a need for it. Everyone's hearing about the metaverse and AR and all these things now, and and there's a realization of something that we've kind of known for a while now, which is that software is going to become more tangled with the physical world. And for that to happen, it needs to have spatial reasoning. And you need something that can understand the three-dimensional physical world in software. And Fizna has the only thing on the market right now that does that. So we knew that we were heading in the right direction, and VC started to see that too. But the other reason we raised more was because as FANG started to explode and as the demand started to increase over COVID, although COVID did have it's a double-edged sword. Companies realized they needed us more, but they also sometimes their budget would freeze and that would slow some things down the pipeline. But overall, we realized that the demand was even higher than we had anticipated. And because of that, we realized, hey, we need to build out a large technical team, like a great team of engineers and a go-to-market team of salespeople, marketers, et cetera, to take full advantage of the opportunity that we have and the narrow window of time that we have to make this a huge success. And that's why for us, raising a lot of capital made a lot of sense. But if we were building something that was, I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but something that is maybe like Craigslist, where it's relatively straightforward what you're building and it's not super capital intensive to get it started and it might have legs of its own kind of early, then maybe you don't need to raise as much VC capital. It's something that you have to weigh based on your needs.
Could you tell us about things and when you built that and you know how that kind of became what seems like a really critical part of sort of your overall mission and goal?
Well, before we raised our Series A, we didn't have the capital to even start working on things. We're just way too capital intensive. But it was clear from long before we did Series A that there's a lot of value in having a Google for 3D and the equivalent like a GitHub for 3D, the ability for people to work together and find models in an area that's in the site that's 100% free. So we actually crawl the web. There's over 3.4 million models on things right now, and it's growing every day. Hundreds of thousands of users every month, millions of users overall. And we've only had it for like a year now. I mean, it's a relatively new product. The strategic reason that we built that was because one, there was a need in the consumer world. Two, we wanted to get more exposure of our product out there, and that would help us become more of a standard. And three, even for the enterprises using our software, it's important for them to be able to eventually search not only their own database, but against the world to see what suppliers actually have these parts that I'm finding. You know, who can I source this from? Who can I buy this from? And so all of that meant that things just made a ton of sense, and it has been exploding. It's actually the fastest growing 3D community history so far.
Wow. And how did you get like the first 10,000 users to use it? How did you seed it out? Was it just through your customers, or did you have other partners that were involved in that?
No, it was just about getting the word out and hoping that people would spread the word, right? And luckily they did, and we were able to work with some pretty interested in people who happen to be sort of influential in the 3D printing market and the AR markets, et cetera. And, you know, they have wide audiences either on social media or on YouTube. And we showed them what we could do, and we got a lot of respect and interest from them. And so that was key to building out that first 10,000, which we hit within a couple, I don't know, I think we hit 10,000 within a month or so of launching, but our growth rate's actually increasing in a really neat way. It's a compounding growth rate that we're experiencing at the moment. That's very much hockey stick like, which is really, really fun to see, and there's a lot of excitement in the team about where things is going.
And how many people work on that?
At our company, you'd be shocked at how small the team is that works on it. We have we're almost 50 people in the company. About 30 or 40, or about a little over 30 of them are 100% product focused. And of those, the team that focuses on things directly is under 10, and people who focus on things indirectly, like they're doing back-end work that also helps things, is maybe a half of the remainder. So maybe another 10, but that's at the absolute high end. I would actually spend a lot of the time, people who are working on things are also working on projects for the enterprise product. So it's a very small team.
Very cool.
But we're looking to grow it. We're very aggressively hiring at the moment.
Um, just as we wrap up, I know Alex is going to come back on and ask some more questions, but if everything goes right for you, I think at least for me, I often think about all the things that can go wrong and like preparing for the worst. You say you started
Right.
7 companies. I mean, sort of similar situation. Most of them failed miserably or spectacularly. Not yours, mine. But like if everything goes right with Fizna, like what happens? Like what does Fizna become?
So I've asked a lot of people how they see us interacting with technology in the future. Like if you think far out in the future, how do you see us interacting? What everyone seems to agree on is that it's more immersive. It's not limited to, pick your size, square, glass rectangle. It's now part of our daily lives, integrating with our lives. And for that to happen, we need, as I mentioned, software needs to transcend that digital auxiliary world and need spatial reasoning, and which Physna provides. So where is Fizna in the future? I see it everywhere. I think it'll be the foundation of a whole new generation of software. Not that we'll build on our own, but that other people, other companies, other developers will build. And we're starting to see the very, very beginning of that now, because we've now been approached by a couple of startups and other companies who are actually very, very interested in using these APIs to build something that, before we release the APIs, wouldn't have been possible to do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to turn it back over to Alex, but I think, just an incredible story and, just what y'all are doing from, we at Startup Grind, we feel just anytime we see you all having another sort of milestone of success, we just get so excited for you all as you participated with us in our startup showcase a few years ago. And so we've just kind of watched and seen the amazing things that you're doing. So really, really happy for your success and thank you so much for being here and giving us all a big update on it.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that.
I definitely echo that. Thanks, Derek. Thanks, Paul. It was awesome to hear and very inspiring to hear the journey that you've been on. I'm sure there's, as you say, it's exponential from here. So we'll keep cheering you on.